Welcome. I'm calling in from down south on my phone, so hopefully the technology will hold up. But we've got a great group, so thanks everybody for joining us this morning. It feels like we've got an awful lot to cover this morning, so we'll do our best to get through it all in the next hour. I thought I would just give a bit of an overview for about 10 minutes on what's happening in the city and potentially wider Scotland. Maybe touch on the internal market bill that was published yesterday. I haven't had a chance to have a real good look at it, but I think it's probably worth a couple of comments on. And then I really wanted to touch, probably more importantly, on how we ensure that Edinburgh has an effective voice for business as we look to recovery and as the economy is reshaping and recovering. And I'd really like to get some input from people on that point if possible. Joanne, who's our Director of Policy, she's been our main conduit into UK government through British Chambers of Commerce and is very tapped into all the business support packages and initiatives and the lobbying that's going on behind the scenes to potentially see these increased and extended. So Joe's going to give an update on what's happening through BCC. And then delighted to say, hopefully we'll have, on a more sort of positive and optimistic note, David Cooper, who is Senior Manager, Commercial Manager at the City of Edinburgh Council in the Directorate of Place, who is going to give an overview on the city development. So there's 5 key or major developments still happening in the city. And really, I guess that's part of the infrastructure investment pillar of the sustainable economic recovery strategy. So I will kick off quickly. I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to cram it all in and see that we get through, so there's an opportunity for contribution and Q&A at the end. So I thought I'd kind of start with where we are in Edinburgh. Hard to believe, nearly, well, over 5 months since lockdown. And we're now seeing a very cautious reopening of the economy. And I would say whilst Edinburgh's probably got a number of sectors who are reasonably resilient through the crisis, sectors like financial services who have been impacted but not significantly. And I think seeing this as an opportunity to look at new ways of working and innovative developments. We've got the universities who have adapted quite quickly. They're looking at a blended approach to campus and online education, trying to get more students back, and which would be great for the city. Staggeringly, something like 20% of the population of Edinburgh is made up of students at the 4 universities. So a major impact on spending and activity in the city. So they are kind of adapting, as I say, but they are putting on hold major capital expenditure as they kind of weather the storm of this. And I suppose we've got some creative industries and technology companies who are seeing this as an opportunity to develop new markets and new opportunities. So a bit of a mixed bag, but I think Edinburgh particularly has been left reeling from the impact of tourism, hospitality and retail. We haven't got the August figures yet, but sort of the July figures show that unemployment claimants up 194% to 18,500. I don't know whether, David, whether you've got any updates later on those figures. We've currently got 69,500 people on furlough in the city. And again, unsure how that's going to play out when the job retention scheme comes to a close in October. And hopefully Joe will be able to give us a bit of an update on that. I know British Chambers of Commerce are lobbying hard to see if this could be extended, even if it's for sector specific. Footfall in the city centre has recovered a little bit in August. It was down by 80% in July. It was down 76% on August last year, this month. So that's having a major impact on the city centre. And we really need to look at how we address this key issue, whilst local towns through the buy local have benefited with people working from home. The city centre having the double whammy of losing tourist visitors to the city, but also office workers who are advised, if they're non-essential, to continue to work from home. So we're having a lot of feedback from members saying that, particularly in the retail and hospitality, that they are losing significant amount of business, and it's hard to see how they will continue through that. Our hotels, we had some feedback from the Edinburgh Hoteliers Association, who represent the 50 largest hotels in Edinburgh. They're saying in the city centre, which accounts for 10,000 of the 16,000 bedrooms in Edinburgh, they saw a bit of a rally in August, up to 53% occupancy. And whilst that doesn't seem so bad, I think it was about 92 last year, the room rates are significantly down on last year, so they've seen a loss of about 33 million of revenue, even though the occupancy level's up. Forward bookings are showing something like 19% occupancy in October and as low as 11% in November. We've got about 5 large hotels who are not opening till spring. I think they feel there's great uncertainty about the Winter Festival and what's coming post the job retention scheme. They would be anticipating a very quiet January, February, so looking closer to March before thinking of reopening, which would be a year essentially of closure. So that's had a huge impact. And I think the Hotel Association has reported something like 3,000 redundancies so far before we get to October. So it is a bit of a depressing picture. What does it mean? I guess for Edinburgh, that means a longer, slower recovery. And, it's going to take time to come back from this. But it also emphasises, I think, the divergence between UK government and Scottish government in terms of policy and philosophical approach to the crisis and recovery. If you look at UK government, they've got a very clear industrial strategy that focuses on infrastructure, people, productivity, and the business environment. And it appears that they want to return to normal as soon as possible, with the government encouraging workers to return to offices if possible. In fact, I think they're trying to get civil servants to at least go back to the office 1 day a week by the end of the month. In contrast, Scottish government, they've taken a much slower, cautious approach, more of an emphasis on public services and the public sector. Their view is that the economy pre-COVID was pretty unfit for purpose, and see this crisis as an opportunity to reshape and bounce forward with a greater focus on fair work, net zero carbon and inclusion. So, hard to disagree with that, but I think where the challenge comes is that when businesses want to do the right thing, but they're also faced with fairly existential issues. And I think at the moment there feels there's a lack of dialogue between local government and national government on how this new economy can be achieved, and how businesses can contribute to that, but cognizant of each other's issues that we're all facing. So I think that there is a challenge, and I think that we probably need to ensure that businesses have a voice and that we can contribute and make sure that the economy recovers in an inclusive way, but in a way that is sustainable for businesses. And I guess at this point, I'd like to point out how Glasgow, it's a rare occasion that I will point out the benefits of Glasgow's approach over Edinburgh, but they seem to have the advantage of about 10 years of an industrial group that was established and is chaired by Glasgow City Council. Immediately the COVID crisis hit, they set up a Glasgow Economic Recovery Group, and the Glasgow Chamber set up a business resilience group that fed into the recovery group. So long before Benny Higgins developed his group for economic recovery, Glasgow were up and running, and they already had their asks and their recovery plan. I feel that Edinburgh is a little bit behind the curve. they don't have a formal structure for business to feed into, what the direct asks are. And I do think that this is an opportunity for the Chamber to potentially establish a group that can have a voice and make sure that that government and City Council are speaking the same language of business. I think issues that we need to look into are planning and licensing, infrastructure investment, digital infrastructure, business rates, but also a bit of clarity around transient visitor levy, which was due to start next year, workplace parking levy, although with people not into offices, how's that going to work next year, and also skills and employability. So I think there's a number of things that, that we need to be making direct asks of. I'm running out of time. I think I'm going over my time. Very quickly touching on the Internal Market Bill. I think we all kind of slightly sharp intake of breath when Brandon, I can never remember his surname, he announced in Parliament yesterday that the UK will be breaking the international law in a limited and specific way. And I think everybody recognises that breaking the law is breaking the law. You either do or you don't. So fairly strenuous condemnation across the EU leaders on that, and from the devolved nations on potential land grab. So I haven't had a chance to have a look at it in detail, but we will come back to you on that one. But it does look like a no-deal Brexit is an increasing likelihood. So with that looming, no deal Brexit on the horizon, potential local lockdowns, second wave through the winter, and then a very quiet January and February tourist season, I'll hand over to Joe, who can potentially cheer us up with some better news.
Thank you, Liz. You've set me up to fail here, I'm afraid, unfortunately. Yes, good morning, everyone. So as Liz has obviously spoken in her update about some of the issues we've been engaged in at local authority and Scottish Government level, but I just wanted to take a couple of minutes just to talk to you this morning about some of the national policy work that we are and have been engaged in on your behalf here at the Chamber on a UK Government level. So as previous CEO briefing attendees will be aware, particularly since the start of the lockdown, we've been working very, very closely with British Chamber of Commerce on UK issues. And we've been very actively engaging with them on your behalf. Over the course of the lockdown, BCC has, and I have to say largely because of the examples that we've been able to provide them with, us and other chambers in the network, about issues that you've been experiencing and raising through local chambers, been very highly engaged at the most senior levels across government, Number 10 Cabinet Office, BAYS, HMRC and the Treasury, among many others. And we made a series of asks, really grouped around 3 key areas. So firstly was about protecting jobs, and that was our first priority. So that was about joining together with a number of the other large business organisations and the organisations like the TUC, which we didn't think would happen. But that was about basically trying to get government to protect and support as many jobs as possible, and the furlough scheme was a big success for us as a network and working together with those other organisations. We also called for an element of flexibility around that scheme because initially, as you'll remember, it was fairly tightly controlled and structured. So we've called for flexibility on that and continued to call for flexibility on that. And we also made some asks around support for the self-employed. We've been successful in obviously in some of that. So there has been an element of flexibility built into the job retention scheme, and the self-employed income support scheme was also launched and extended as a consequence of our lobbying. As Liz mentioned in her introduction, obviously, given the fact that the Chancellor has very publicly stated that will end in October, we continue to lobby to keep that going, or some form of it going, for as long as possible, particularly, and if it can't be kept going, as the sort of catch-all that it has been across all sectors, we're particularly asking for support for very specific sectors that we know may not even be fully open by the time the furlough scheme ends. So that's a call that we continue to make, and will continue to do so. We also made some asks around maintaining cash flow, so we called for the suspension of business rates, VAT and national insurance payments. We called for the opening up of schemes to firms that were stopped by state aid rules, and we made a lot of calls around gaps in provision, so particularly initially for support for small and mid-sized firms, but also support for larger firms that didn't qualify for some of the larger schemes that were available to listed companies, etc. Again, we were successful in quite a few of those asks. So VAT and national insurance payments were suspended and business rates for some sectors. The bounce back loan scheme was implemented, and that was we did a lot of work on the bounce back loan scheme in response to the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, where we provided quite a lot of feedback about the difficulties that not just our members but also financial providers were experiencing, and trying to get that up and moving and getting cash to the front line as quickly as possible. So we did work very closely on that, and the bounce back loan scheme was a result of that. We got state aid rules reinterpreted, and we got provision extended in the form of the Future Fund for startups and high growth businesses and larger businesses through the large business interruption loan scheme. We also made a number of asks about stepping towards recovery. So in that we looked at protection for commercial tenants, protecting supply chains and trading relationships through the reinsurance of trade credit policies. We looked at specific support for young people who we knew early on were being very adversely affected by some of the employment and labour market issues, and also support for peripheral issues but that were absolutely critical to the reopening of the economy, such as on the reopening of schools, of childcare provision, and of transport too. So again, we had some success there, but obviously there's much still to do. We did manage to get temporary support for evictions, for example, for commercial tenants. We did work very closely, both the British Chambers of Commerce and Scottish Chambers of Commerce, on the various government plans post-lockdown. So the coronavirus recovery strategy at the UK level and the route map for Scotland, we continue to engage on those. And in fact, I was at a meeting yesterday in Liz's absence with Scottish Chambers of Commerce. There is a meeting happening this afternoon with the First Minister to talk about that as a priority issue. So we're feeding views in very directly on that issue. We've managed to launch the Kickstart scheme, for example, which again we were very engaged with to make sure. The very first call that I attended on that, it felt very much like a government scheme just to tick a box to support a disadvantaged group, but we've worked very hard with the Department for Work and Pensions to make sure the design of that scheme is such that it does actually help to support business needs, as well as the needs of the young people who will hopefully be placed through that scheme. So that's been a bit of a success for us. And we made very specific calls for specific sectors, particularly those that have been adversely or that have adverse impact for Edinburgh. So aviation and airlines, construction, tourism and hospitality. We've stepped in specifically on issues related to those issues. We've engaged very closely with the Scottish Government on devolved issues. We've gathered insight by supporting the work of the British Chambers of Commerce Impact Tracker surveys and the Quarterly Economic Survey, the results of which have been shared with very senior stakeholders and really do make a difference in terms of getting policymakers to see and understand the impact of businesses on the ground. And we've run a number of events. We were very engaged with the Benny Higgins report, the advisory group on economic recovery. We've hosted sessions with the Small Business Commissioner to try and support some of our smaller members. And we did do things like we did submit a response to the consultation on the UK internal market. I know Liz has touched on that, questionable how impactful that actually was, that consultation piece. But as Liz has said, you know, more to do on that, and we'll continue to pick up on that over the coming days. In terms of immediate future focus, we are continuing to lobby for support for businesses. As I've said, we know there are some gaps in provision. We know the end of the furlough scheme in October is a major worry and concern for members. And we know, obviously, that there are specific sectors that aren't fully opened yet and may not be by the time furlough scheme ends. So we are really pushing for that and for further support there, and support in the form of grants or rather than necessarily additional loans, because again, we're very concerned about leveraging and all that kind of stuff that we know is an issue for our members. We are also looking at engaging on issues such as the reopening of offices. I know Liz touched on that very briefly. As I've mentioned, there's a meeting today with the First Minister that Scottish Chambers of Commerce will attend, where that will be very much on the agenda, alongside things like confidence and messaging, which we want to send a very clear message to the First Minister about, and things like testing as well, and making sure the testing regime is fit for purpose and supportive to that confidence and messaging piece. And an implementation plan for the programme for government that was announced last week. Some good stuff in that, but not a tremendous amount of detail. And we want to know and understand exactly when we're going to see that detail and what that will look like. We'll continue to engage on the Kickstart scheme. We'll continue to engage on the internal market bill. And as Liz has also touched on, Brexit is rapidly moving up the agenda and providing support for members and clarity where we can on what arrangements need to be made is a priority for us immediately over the next couple of months. And then over the longer term, from a BCC perspective, we are looking at 3 pillars of ask. So Restart Ask, focused on the phased reopening of the economy. They were published in May. We can share those with you if you didn't see them. We've got Rebuild Asks, which are focusing on building resilience for business, and those are going to be published in the autumn. And Renew Asks, which will focus on returning to prosperity and growth. They'll be published in early 2021. What I'd like to finish, I know I'm running out of time, but I would like to finish just by making an ask, and apologies, I know this is a whirlwind. If there's any one of these issues that you want to discuss more on, please do get in contact. We have a policy inbox at the Chamber where you can direct any queries, or you can give myself a call. What has been absolutely the most effective thing for us in lobbying and speaking with government has been taking real life examples from members of what has been happening on the ground, and that has been by far and away the most effective means that we have deployed to try to gain the successes that we have done up until now. I would please encourage you to continue to do that, keep feeding back your issues and concerns, and allow us to represent you and be that voice in those areas for you. So that's all I had. So thanks for that, Liz.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Jo. As you can see, it's been a busy time, and it's almost impossible to do it justice with just an hour's call. But really interested in hearing from David Cooper, and I guess you know, hopefully this will be the optimistic and positive part of this. It's about kind of really developing the city and looking forward to our future. I know the City Council have their challenges, and you know, we want to contribute to supporting the recovery. You know, the City Council have got something like a 30 million budget deficit and growing. They've lost significant revenue streams and revenue opportunities with their commercial activities. And you know, their focus, and rightly so, has been about health and social care and continuing to deliver core services. They've got an adaptation and renewal strategy in order to deliver this, and alongside that is the sustainable economic recovery strategy based around 5 pillars, which is investment in infrastructure, employability, business support, city of festivals and culture, and innovation. So we're keen that we are focusing on each of those 5 pillars. So I'm really interested to hear from David, who's going to talk about that investment and infrastructure piece. And hopefully there'll be an opportunity for some Q&A afterwards. Well, thanks very much, David.
Okay, thank you, Liz, and good morning, everyone. I've got a few slides. I'll try and rattle through them as quickly as possible to allow some time for questions. So I'll just get on with some of the catchphrases of 2020. If I'll just bear with me while I share my screen. And hopefully everyone's now seeing that. Okay. What I'd really like to talk about is just give you a development update, what's happening in the city. And I suppose in doing that, I can't really do that without talking about the COVID crisis and the impact on the economy. So I'd like to just reflect on where we were as a city, where we currently are. A lot of that's been set out very well by Liz and Joe, but where we might go next. I would say, just as the usual caveat, that while I'm a representative of the council, these views are mine and not necessarily those of the council, but I hope that we can stimulate a bit of discussion. So where were we as a city? Well, we take you back to the distant past of otherwise known as 2019, and I found this image, which for me sums up the city perfectly. It's a busy Royal Mile with people socially interacting, and as they walk past the statue of Adam Smith, it says a lot about the DNA of the city, it being a incredibly vibrant, busy city, incredible visitor economy, young population, educated population, great universities, obviously the festivals, and obviously as a city of enlightenment, we have that background of economics and finance and law, and all those things that really make us incredible. And from a property point of view, we were doing very, very well at that time. If you look at growth rate in rent levels, house prices, room occupancy in the hotel sector, all of those were some of the strongest in the UK or potentially even in Europe. And really we were doing very well. We were also doing well from a delivery point of view. There were supply challenges. There was obviously still at that point in time challenges in relation to construction prices, construction costs, but we were doing well in delivering against that with effective housing land supply. And we were even seeing an uptake, particularly in office development, which was long overdue. So it was a really positive picture, although not without its challenges. Even then, we probably had growth that was centred on the city centre, and not much room for it. Therefore, there was competition between asset classes, and there was also, quite rightly, discussions starting to happen with the wider community about the balance between those different use classes and indeed the festivals and how we manage that within a growing city. And of course, challenges with affordability. That growth in prices is not all great if it prices out small or medium-sized businesses or key workers from the city. And we were already seeing that some businesses were having to move out, and particularly young families were often moving out of the city to find living accommodation. So moving on, where we are now, I mean, I'll not touch on this too much. Obviously, Liz and Joe have set that out. We've had a real shock to the economy. The lockdown has effectively brought the economy to a halt abruptly, and we're now getting back into working again and being productive, but with those limitations. And what I would like to take you through now are some of the projects that we're currently working on in the city, where they are. As Liz had said, in terms of that economic recovery piece, one of the first things we were keen to do as a council was to look across all of our, not just our sort of development projects, the commercial and housing portfolios, but also schools and everything else that we build, to try and get those sites back up and running as soon as possible, get people back into work and get things being delivered. And to a large extent, we've managed that, although we're working under, obviously, the restrictions and observing the regulations around these points. So firstly, Fountain Bridge, many of you will know about this project. It's about 450 residential units sitting along the canal side, along with 100,000 square feet of office space there. There's an image of it there. The council was in the middle of procuring a development partner for all this, so we had to do a couple of project reviews, but that is back on running again. We're now in the final stage of that procurement process with six bidders who are all still keen to work on the project, which is really good news. So hoping to bring that to conclusion ideally later this year, depending on how much negotiation is required, or early next year, and thereafter begin the process of taking forward the development with the selected partner. We also have other, if you like, our mixed use portfolio that I'm responsible for, Meadowbank, where we again have just started the procurement process for development partner there. The sports stadium is under construction now back under construction, and we have about another 500 units there with commercial space, GP surgery, some other ancillary uses. And a similar sort of approach, development partner, we're starting that procurement. Again, positive response to the market wanting to work with the council on this. And I think generally showing confidence in the medium to longer term prospects for Edinburgh. And similarly, Powder Hall, we also have, which is in the Bonington area. That is probably a slightly different approach, but we'll be going out to select contractors soon to get started on the affordable housing and the Powder Hall Stables block. And thereafter, we'll be looking to market engagement for taking forward the private housing offer there. It's around about 300 units with some commercial space as well. And again, we're keen to get that moving forward. Granton, huge project for the council. This was agreed by council earlier this year in February for the development framework and the overall project execution plan. The team are now working on the outline business case and have been since that date, which will hopefully come back early next year, all going well. And thereafter, we'll be looking to, again, engage with the market. So a really big opportunity. Gives you an idea of the scale there. It's about 50 hectares of developable land. That's around about 3,500 homes, 35% of which will be affordable. Probably about 20,000 square feet of new cultural and commercial space. And so a really exciting prospect. And again, we're keen to get that moving. What I would also maybe just say in relation to the overall programme for development in the city, particularly our housing revenue account, which is funded through the homes that we own as a council and that our tenants pay the rent for those homes. That generates money that's reinvested into the city back into existing homes and new development. That's around about a £2.5 billion programme over the next 10 years, and will help to deliver another 10,000 affordable homes. So again, keen to get these big projects moving and generate the jobs and the activity that goes with that, and hopefully the confidence in the city. Moving on, BioQuarter. Again, a similar story in terms of where we're at. This is a partnership project between the council, NHS Lothian, University of Edinburgh and Scottish Enterprise. Most of you will know the Royal Infirmary. You'll have seen some of the buildings that are already there, but there's a huge amount of development yet to come, and the partners have just started that process of looking to secure a partner to deliver the opportunity here. This is one of Europe's largest life sciences opportunities, and the ambition here is to be a global destination for health innovation that's focused on life sciences, data innovation, medical teaching, research and healthcare delivery. This is it's about £1 billion project in its own right. It's a 167 acre site, and it will generate around about 3.5 million square feet of commercial space and about 9,000 jobs. So that went out to the start of the procurement process just a couple of weeks ago, and the Bidders' Day was held online with 250 attendees from all over the UK and Europe and even further afield. So really strong interest in the offer here, and again a really great project. Not just because of the jobs, but for the outputs that we should get from this in terms of life sciences, which is obviously very, very topical at the moment. And there's just a view of the how it should feel, and it's very much designed to be more of a new quarter to the city, sort of town centre feel to it, set in amongst all the development that's happening round about it. You've got about 6,000 homes either planned or under construction in and around that area. So real big change to the city there in the southeast. St James, glad to say that this is now back under construction again. This is obviously led by Nuveen and APG as the investors here. This is about 850,000 square feet of new retail space, a W hotel that you can see there, much talked about, rooms apart hotel. It comes with event space and 150 residential units and a 5-screen cinema. The council's role here is through the Growth Accelerator model, which helps deliver additional public realm and the energy centre. That has a value of around about £60 million of support for this project, which was obviously not the best centre before. Hopefully going to be great once it's completed. And I'll just run you through some of the nice images we have, some of the latest renders. You can see the entrance. There's some of the residential up top. It's the Maltese Walk entrance, and you can see some of the names trading now. They've done very well in terms of lettings actually. So pretty strong, not fully yet let yet, but pretty strong performance given the prevailing climate. And there is some displacement, but also as was hoped, some new names coming to the city that haven't been here before trading. So really, hopefully, it will boost Edinburgh's retail offer in the round. It's what it will look like inside, and just to show that it is actually happening. There's a recent photograph with the ribbon starting to go on the W Hotel. So huge project. One of the largest in the UK even before the challenges we've experienced, and incredible job actually by Nuveen and by Lang O'Rourke as the contractor to get back on track. Opening date, I don't have a specific date, but the target is around April next year for the retail to open, and then probably about 6 months on, as was the original programme, for the hotel and the residential then to follow. So great progress there, and great to see that they're back on track. And I suppose just maybe some other projects that I'll touch on. And I think really just I think it's great that so many of the developers in the city have restated their support for the city and their belief that it's a great place to actually be and to invest in. We've heard from Diageo and Johnny Walker Centre that they're committed to that project and getting it moving again. Parabola at Edinburgh Park, who are building a speculative office right now, and that was a brave move prior to this. It's really bold now, and they have a real belief in their project and in the city, and lots of others. Haymarket, others at West Edinburgh, Crosswind, IBG, all the house builders who are back up and running as far as possible. So there's a lot going on. And of course, Haymarket and Quarter Mile. We also have the EICC hotel, which we are still working to take that forward with them and support that development. So a lot happening, a lot more to come as well, I hope. So in terms of where next, I think as Liz and Joe were talking, we have a real challenging time ahead of us. We've had this abrupt halt to the economy, but there have been support packages in place. We're now facing a scenario where those support packages will start to run out to some extent, and yet the economy might not be able to fully open up, and that's probably really dangerous territory. I'm sorry, Liz, I don't have the latest unemployment presentations, but it is increasing, and it's something that we've not really had to deal with as a city before. We've had challenges around poverty in work, but we've had a relatively low level of unemployment in the city. So there are those challenges. I think there's inevitably going to be a slowdown to the economy. What that means for, I think, development is yet to be seen. A lot of, if you like, optimism still, but starting to hear people use the phrase, well, we might wait and see. So we'll have to do what we can to try and support. And I think one of the key challenges, as I start this, I was talking about the pressure on our city centre, and I've heard one or two people almost talking about the donut effect now, which has never been a challenge for Edinburgh, but something you'd expect of sort of industrialised American cities. I don't think that will happen, but I do think we will have a challenge. COVID-19 is accelerating a lot of trends. So what it means for retail sector, what it means for the office sector, both of which are important, and of course the visitor economy, what that means for the city. We were talking about the challenges, the pressures on the city as a result of that economy. We're now realising just how important that sector was for lots of other sectors. Obviously hotel, but also retail. I think this won't be the death of city centres, though, far from it. I actually think that once we get through this, whenever that is, that there'll be an absolute renaissance of city centres. I think people will want to come back to festivals. I think people will be delighted to do that, and I think we just need to work together to be ready to make those changes. And some of that, I suppose, the final thing I would say would be, we've taken a decision as a council to move forward with city plan, and a proposed plan, hopefully ready for December to go out for consultation. We're also, as part of the economic recovery piece, looking to rework our planning concordat, which is essentially an agreement between ourselves, the development community, led by the Chamber of Commerce, and the wider community led by the Association of Community Councils. So we're looking to revisit that so that we can look at and widen that out as well to being a development concordat, to try and look at some of those things Liz was talking about in terms of planning and licensing, and how we can provide a service that is good for business but also respects the wishes of communities for engagement. So a lot to do. I hope that has been useful as a bit of a fly through. I've probably missed lots and lots of projects, and if you ask me about them, I might know about them, so it's worth a try. But happy to take any questions or take part in any discussion then.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, David. As I think it's really encouraging that you say the developers are very much committed to the city, and that these developments, I know that a lot of them have been in the pipeline for some time, so that they are continuing to come to fruition, and obviously requiring significant investment. So thanks very much for that, David. Can I open it up? Rebecca, you've got control of the mic. Can I open it up to questions or any comments, please? Anyone with their hands up or quiet? Puts pressure on you now to ask some questions.
Can I ask a question? It's Paul McLennan from Playfair Scotland here. It's really on the rebuild part, the restart, rebuild, refocus kind of stuff, and it's more around about business support, mentoring, and probably debt advice. There's probably going to be businesses that will be going into debt and having to deal with this for the first time. I'm just wondering what the chambers are doing in regards to that, and what the council's trying to do in that regard as well. Literally to go over the next 6 months and hopefully go on to next year, where you're starting to look at the new kind of stuff. So it's more on the mentoring, the support. And has there been any interaction, for example, with the banks, who probably need to be a major part of this and trying to support businesses over the next number of months?
Yeah, well, we are kind of quite heavily involved. We've just established our mentoring program, so we launched it on the 28th of September, and like the previous government mentoring program, this is open to anyone. And you know, if you've got ambition and you want to get support through the recovery process, then we will provide a free mentor for a year. We're also getting engaged in the Kickstart program. So we're trying to place young people between ages of 16 and 24 into businesses for 6 months, and that's fully funded by government in terms of salary, national insurance and pension contribution. And I think there's an additional, this is where Joe, who's worked with BCC, has helped a lot, because there's now an additional £1,500 available to the employer in terms of IT training, induction, and helping these young people get a meaningful placement. We're also running some business clinics. So we've got some of our bigger members, bigger corporates, who are giving free time in terms of supporting business through recovery, new strategies, marketing plans, internationalization. So there is a whole range of business support that we've got. But I do think, and as I mentioned earlier, there needs to be a closer dialogue with City of Edinburgh Council and Scottish Government. I think businesses are facing huge challenges. You're right, many have taken on huge amounts of debt. So we are looking, I know Joe is leading on, how do we potentially lobby for a student loan repayment type on this debt, so that businesses start repaying it when they are making sufficient revenue to afford it. So there's a whole range of things if we are to see businesses through it. But I am concerned that by October, when the job retention scheme comes to a close, that we are going to see significant unemployment, and we've got a generation of young people who are missing opportunities. So I would encourage anybody who wants to give a young person an opportunity and also get the benefit of their enthusiasm and knowledge and IT skills to contact us about the Kickstart program. We're applying for intermediary status. So if you can take more than 30 young people, you can deal directly with DWP. If less than 30, if you're a smaller business, we need to cluster them through intermediaries. So please contact us and we can support on that. Joe, I don't know whether you want to come in on anything?
Sure, just to say, Paul, on your point about the banks, yeah, we have been talking to, so I was actually just checking the call there to see if Kevin Havelock was still with us. I know he did join us earlier, but I'm not sure if he's still here from RBS, but I know we've been engaging very closely with them throughout, and I know that they have been doing a lot of outreach work to their customers on exactly that issue, because they too are concerned about gearing and possible business failure come Q2 next year when these things start to be due to be paid back. So we're working on the government side, as Liz has said, to try to prevent that from happening using government levers where they're available. But I know that some of the banks, and particularly RBS, I'm sure others are doing it too, are taking that responsibility very seriously and engaging with customers to try to preempt any issues there.
And David, I would imagine, and we connect well with Elin and her team around Business Gateway and economic support. So I think there's quite a bit of work being carried on through the Business Gateway programme as well, supporting businesses.
Yeah, that's right, Liz. And Elin, I think, presented this series before. I'm sure we'd be happy to do that again. She leads in our business growth and inclusion and looks after Business Gateway from the council side. Yeah, I suppose other points, I think, Liz, your point about, gearing up and, getting the message out and, going on a, united front to Scottish Government to say what the asks are. As you know, there's been a series of roundtables that is the Economic Advisory Panel that's been, if you like, collecting information, but we need to probably now move that to the next stage. And I think that the council's probably, as you said as well, our approach at the moment has really been about crisis response, and we now need to move into recovery mode and get that package understood and agreed. And I suppose from my side, the development side, and maybe some of my colleagues who look after our, the council's a big landlord, so there maybe are things that we can look at in terms of rent reviews or things that we can do to maybe hold on to tenants. Although, as Liz also said, that's a real challenge for the council at the moment, because we're a pretty lean council and we work pretty well commercially to support the council's finances, and so we're feeling the challenge like everyone else as that side of our income is reduced at the moment.
And I guess, with local lockdowns probably increasing over the winter period, and as the economy starts to open up a little bit, we are going to see more local lockdowns. And I think the challenge is trying to get additional support from UK and Scottish Government. I think UK Government has announced a package of about £1,500 for every 3 weeks of lockdown for businesses, but it's nowhere near enough. I know with the Aberdeen recent local lockdown, they were closed down for near enough a month, and I think businesses, the package available amounted to about £1,500 per business. So for those who had geared up or even just opened to then have to close again, the impact was devastating. So we need to make sure that there is financial support for businesses to see them through this. And we will continue to lobby for that.
Thanks, Liz.
So any other questions? David, if I can ask, obviously you talked about the brands coming to the St. James Centre, and actually I think it's been a huge success that a lot of the big retailers are committed to coming here. I guess the perennial question is Princes Street. There will be a lot of displacement of the retailers from Princes Street into St. James. We're also seeing a massive increase in online shopping. So, there are huge challenges. I was fascinated that Jeff Bezos in 1999 predicted that by 2020, unless retailers had, I think it was immediate convenience or experiential experiences to offer, then vast majority of our purchasing would be done online. And he's pretty close to that. So what are we doing with Princes Street to try and keep that heart of the city? I know you've got the Central Edinburgh Transformation Project, but are there any specific ideas for Princes Street?
I mean, Princes Street is, it's a good question, Liz. Princes Street has been, I suppose it's been debated for a number of years in terms of whether it's right as a city centre offer, you know, once described as the longest bus stop in Europe, you know, and the fact that it's, you know, for a long time had vacant space at higher level, you know, upper levels used for storage. And on the positive side, you know, as a street, Princes Street has reinvented itself numerous times over the years, and I think it's an absolutely fantastic street when you look at that, you know, south-facing view towards the castle. I think, you know, St James, there will be displacement. You know, for example, Zara will be moving, but Zara are part of the overall family there. Bershka and Pull & Bear are also brands that haven't been in Edinburgh that are moving to St James. So I do feel that St James, we're better off with St James than without it. And this, you know, would have still been a challenge for us had we not had St James, but it is having an additional impact. I think I mentioned the Johnny Walker Visitor Centre at the former Fraser's building at the West End. You know, I think you've got almost two sort of dumbbells there either side of Princes Street that will have that experiential offer. I think what the rest of Princes Street really needs to think about is how it's, if you like, reinvented. And I think there's been some move in policy terms from the council to make the policy position, planning policy position, a bit more open, allowing more food and drink offer and things like that to move in. But I think we maybe need to sort of move that on again and think about whether there's more, for example, hotels or even apartments in Princes Street, but perhaps retaining at the ground floor level, you know, either retail or food and beverage or whatever it might be. So I think it can reinvent itself. There's maybe an opportunity in this that we can move to that more quickly than it might have been at other times. But yeah, I mean, it's a concern, and it's something we'll have to address.
And I guess kind of critical really is, and I think you touched on it earlier, that you know, tourism had been criticised as sort of taken over the city and not being focused enough on citizens. And I think you're right that everyone now realises the importance of festivals and culture and tourism has on the city. So, you know, in hindsight, winding down Marketing Edinburgh was probably, you know, nobody could foresee this at the time, and it's pleasing to see that the City Council with the Strategic Implementation Group for Tourism and ETAG have launched the Forever Edinburgh campaign. This is a campaign, it's almost like love letters from the city, reminding people who've been here before to come back again and why they should revisit the city. And for those who've been thinking about it, never quite got round to it, all the good reasons why you should come. But we do need to ensure that we've got that sector back up and running. 4 million visitors a year to the city, you know, has major impact on investment decisions. You know, St James Centre, I'm sure, you know, it was a considerable decision making on 4 million footfall. And when you look at the city centre footfall at the moment, that you know, that's not creating that vibrant economy that we need for recovery. So I think you know, if I could just comment rather than put you on the spot, you know, I think that we need to make sure that we get our tourism economy up and running. It's not just the 36,000 jobs it supports, but it's the supply chain, the very extensive supply chain. Potentially 4 times that number that are being badly hit at the moment. And just reading, I can see Sadie McKinley there, just reading that the Edinburgh Festival had 1 million views from 47 countries for their recent digital programme. Phenomenal, but that's a result of 70 years of the festival establishing Edinburgh as the world-class #1 festival city in the world. And unfortunately, now people can be digital and do these things. You know, we've got to keep our wits about us and make sure that we look after and treasure and curate the assets that we have, and make sure that Edinburgh bounces back really, really quickly. I just looking, we've run out of time. Before I sort of bid everyone cheerio, can I just go back to my plea? I think that we the Chamber would like to establish a business resilience group, because we need to capture the views of businesses and feed it into the City Council and national government. Glasgow is a fantastic model. The Glasgow Chamber set up this resilience group. They had about 60 people on it. They met every week through the crisis. Around about 30 people on average attended at any one time, so it rotated many different views, and I think we need to establish that. So anyone who would be interested in joining a group like that, to make sure that we are capturing the real issues of business, and so that we can go to government and local authorities and say, enable us to contribute. What are you going to do to help us bring the city back to where it needs to be, or forward with the Fair Work inclusion? We want to be responsible businesses, and in general, businesses want to do the right thing. So please, if you can drop us a line, if you would like to contribute to that. As Joe said, we issue a quarterly economic survey that we run through British Chambers of Commerce. It's one of the most valued surveys in the UK and is used by government extensively to understand business and to develop policies. So we are not that great at getting people to contribute to that. We need to do better. So if everyone can try and contribute, I don't think it takes very long to fill it out, but if we can contribute to the quarterly economic survey, that would be fantastic. If I could just say thank you very much for attending, everyone. I hope you found this useful. If there's any topics you want us to cover or any information, just drop us a line. But thanks very much for joining us, and hope you have a good week. Rest of the week. There's not much to go now. But cheerio, everybody. Thank you.